masalahnya aku enggak.
Ini kan.
Coba kameranya kan sudah nyala, cuma aku belum mulai. Apa ya? Kalau sana kan udah nyala, ya misalnya ini kan belum jalan kan, yang masuk ke depan. Kalau ini acara ini kan, iya. Gimana caranya? Video profile sekarang. Profile.
Menampilkan apa yang ada di guru sudah. Acaranya dari mulai dari tadi. Infonya yang dari kamera sana ditayangkan di infonya sini gitu. Iya, bisa. Soalnya dari tadi saya sudah masuk tapi belum ada apa-apa. Enggak, ini kan ada kamera di tengah kan ada terus ke sini. Apa kayak muncul di zoomnya gitu. Jadi webcam.
Kamera tengah ya. Kalau masuk ke zoom ke sini ya bisa. Lagi masuk menurut. Cuma saya.
So I think we're just going to start off. Hand it over to you. Thank you. Can you all hear me? So again, thank you so much for having me. Very pleasure to be here and
Kamu orang mana? Aku ngomong gitu.
Siapa namanya?
Nah, apa? Ini kayak kamera. Iya, kabelnya yang hubungan ini. Kita kan layar di tengah kan kita udah nggak kamera.
Ini siapa sih yang berat tengah?
Masalah juga. Aduh, masalah juga. Oh, oke.
Kemarin tuh ya mas, ini tuh bisa ke kamera itu loh, tapi nggak tahu gimana.
Masukin di sini ya, coba.
Mana ini? Ya udah hijau. Ini juga ada. Terus, ada
If anyone else was doing what I thought, I mean, maybe I suppose the matter is that I would have to do this. Bukan dari rumah ke sini. Oke, kalau
Masih belum ada suara.
It's sene, which means new. And what it actually is referring to, it's a new era that was described by Eugene Stormer, who is a biologist, and Paul Crutzen, who is a chemist in the year 2000. And they suggested it as a new unit of geological time. So it hasn't been adopted yet officially as a new geological era. However, it's being used, in the literature by researchers to describe the time we are currently living in. And what are they describing? Because in their research, they found that by looking, for example, at soil samples from around the world, looking at the impact of the past 200 years, which is since the age of industrialization, you can see around the world a huge impact of human activity. Okay? Before that, up to 200 years ago, there isn't that much, right? Because we as humankind did not have a lot of impact on our planet. We were using materials that easily decayed, right? We were not using industrial style chimneys and air pollution, But since then, since about 200 years ago, we've really started to ramp up our impact on the planet. And this is visible in the soil samples. And that's what they said. This is what they're referring to as the era of the Anthropocene. So basically, it's characterized by a dramatic increase in human activity that is impacting the planet. This is the Anthropocene. So for me, I'm a teacher, obviously. I'm a teacher educator. I was born and raised and studied my first degree in biology and environmental science at the University of Salzburg in Austria. So I'm Austrian originally, before I migrated to Australia. And this is a glacier in my home country. Now, I don't know if you know much about Austria, but Austria is a very mountainous country. It's normally a very cool country. So when temperatures in summer go up to about 35 degrees, we say it's really hot. It is really hot.
It's very normal in Jember.
Well, I now live in Western Australia, right, where temperatures go up to 45, which is slightly different. But in Austria, I visited this glacier with my parents in the 1970s when I was a child. And it was at the time about 10 kilometers long. It was our largest glacier in our country. And you can see here, this is a photo that I took in about 5 years ago. You can see the 1995 mark, where it was in 1995. And this was 5 years ago. So that should tell you something, how much it has reduced in size, how much has melted away. And when glaciers melt, what that means is that we lose fresh water, right? Because this is a huge storage for fresh water. For the planet, all the glaciers around the world are huge freshwater reservoirs. And we're losing them. Because what happens, obviously, is the glacier melts into a river, the river flows towards the ocean and ends up in the ocean, not available as fresh water any longer, right? So that's huge. That's just a visible example of how the climate has changed over the past decades. So we have climate change. We are all confronted with threats to global security, right? Because we are all, like we all have our slightly different immediate concerns. Some concerns might be shared between Indonesia and Australia. And, other concerns are more focused on Europe at the moment. So, there are concerns everywhere around the world at the moment. We've got wars. We've got active wars at the moment, and every day we hope that they come to an end, but they seem to keep going. We see every morning, just this morning, I just quickly checked the news, and guess what I saw? More images of starving children. And should not be the case that at our age we have to put up with images of starving children. This is just not okay. Whichever way you look at it, it's not okay. We've got global pandemics. We've all lived through one, right? You're all here, so you've lived through it. Yes, we made it. But that doesn't mean that there won't be another one. And there is actually, researchers are suggesting that the next pandemic is just around the corner. But what are we doing? We've just gone back to normal, haven't we? As if nothing ever happened. And will we be as, quick to respond or better at responding next time around? Who knows? Fingers crossed. We got an increase in individualism versus what is in philosophy referred to as the common good. where the common good describes doing things not just for your own best interest, but because it serves everyone around you. Okay, because it serves your community, it serves the planet, it serves, other people. We got unbridled consumerism versus sustainable development. Now, when I turn the television on in Australia, I often complain that there are too many advertisements. But when I turned the Indonesian television on the other day, I was just blown away by how many advertisements you have. And each advertisement is trying to sell you something. It's trying to get you to consume more, consume things that maybe you don't need, but you think you need because the advertisement tells you so. So what we have is we've got so many crises, we can't even put our fingers on at the moment which crisis to focus on, isn't it? It's like confusing. It's as a time, as an era, it is confusing. And this matches very well what the French philosopher Émile Durkheim described as a state of anomie. Anomie is another Greek word. A means without, and nomia means law. So basically, we have a time where things are very confusing because the old rules by which the world has been functioning for a long time don't seem to apply. My own understandings, my own value systems, if you like, challenged every day. And this has led to an increase in the number of people who report to have depression, anxiety, particularly amongst young people and children. We've got a rising rate of anxiety and depression in school students. And we can trace that back to these crazy times. I mean, don't we all feel it a little bit? Like, just watching the news is a challenge. I have friends who have decided not to watch the news anymore and instead only focus on good vibes. Have you heard that before? Probably on Instagram, only good vibes, or good vibes only. Yes. So we don't let anything in of what's concerning, right? There is. In English, they often refer to people like that as a Pollyanna. Have you heard about this before? Pollyanna used to be a movie, so you can look that up. The movie Pollyanna is about a character, a woman, who has exactly this attitude to life. Only the good things, only the good things. I won't even look at anything that's concerning. Right? So the state of anomie that we're in, right, can have different effects on different people. For some people, this could lead, this state of deep unsettlement, feeling unsettled, can lead to a state of what the great Albert Bandura, I'm pretty sure you've all come across him. He's a social psychologist and often taught in psychology, educational psychology, so I'm sure you've heard his name. And he coined the term moral disengagement. And what he basically was saying there in the original text, he says, when self-regulation fails, allowing actions which would violate one's own standards of right and wrong. In plain English, what that means is, in a crisis, some people can throw out the values they normally have and do things they would not normally do. Like, for example, someone who's under great pressure, right? And for example, in Australia, we have a huge crisis of living crisis where people have problems with the costs of living. They cannot pay their rent. Even though you've got two people in a family working, they still can't pay their rent. They still, find it hard to put food on the table. And I've heard, this is similar here, so similar issues here. I know from my home country, Austria, same thing, problems with cost of living. So, for example, people under that pressure, it's too hard, or it's too hard, or I don't care. Okay? So when I was saying before, we all know the theory because we've heard it everywhere. But unless we actually really think about it, right, we might fall into the moral disengagement trap where we go, there's nothing I can do. Like there's all these big industries, and there's everybody else who should do something, nothing I can do as a person. But think for a moment, if all of us think that, no one will do anything, which is not great, is it? And think about it, what that means for teachers, right? And where our chances to come in. So, but challenges have always existed for humankind. These are arrowheads. They are 30,000 years old. And they were found in my homeland, in Austria, like about 10 years ago. And they were made by hunter-gatherers who were living in the area at a time when there was still the Ice Age in Europe. There was, for many, many years, there was an assumption that no people lived in that area because it was too inhospitable. People couldn't have survived there, right? There was too much ice. And yes, there were some mammoths roaming around somewhere, but, how would people even have hunted mammoths? Now we know they did. They did hunt mammoths and they survived in this very inhospitable environment. And they made those arrowheads, right? And they improved those arrowheads over time, right? So basically, they had a lot of challenges and it wasn't easy, but they kept evolving. And like ourselves, they kept changing the way they thought about things. They couldn't give up because otherwise they couldn't have survived, or we wouldn't be here, right, if they had given up. So our consciousness, wisdom and knowledge needs to evolve too and grow and transform because our survival as a species depends on this. So yes, we live in difficult times. Yes, we live in absolutely crazy times, really crazy. But what that really means is that we need to change our consciousness to survive in this new environment. Because the alternative would be to morally disengage and to, as we say in English, check out. Okay? Nothing to do with me. Oh, no. So this grandfatherly man is actually Jack Mezirow. You may have come across him. He's the father of transformative education. And he basically developed the theory of transformative learning. So if you want to change your consciousness, if you want to change your attitudes, transformative learning is your way to do it. And you do all transformative learning, according to Mezirow, starts with a disorienting dilemma. In other words, a situation we can't find an easy solution for. Right? Something where we get to a point where we go, this is hard. This is hard. But think back to the hunter-gatherers with the arrowheads. They also thought, there's a mammoth. This is hard. But I need to hunt it somehow. I need to eat. So that leads to a cognitive crisis. In other words, we need to think. We need to think quickly how to change our attitude, okay, to arrive at a transformation. So transformative education holds that we need to use critical self-reflection on our granted assumptions, the belief that we have held up to now, and our values. So basically, we need to check in with ourselves to transform ourselves. As a pedagogy, it is underpinned by critical constructivism. Now, I'm pretty sure you've constructivism and probably critical constructivism. And if you haven't heard about critical constructivism, it might be worth looking it up. So basically, by examining our own assumptions, beliefs, and values, we can make a person more sensitive towards sustainable development. Now, what does that mean? We provide our students with opportunities to reflect on their assumptions, on their beliefs and their values. So knowing what is good and what is the right thing to do depends on our values. So for many people around the globe, we derive our values from perhaps religious backgrounds, right? All the major religions of the world provide us with values frameworks, and they agree in almost all regards about what is good and what is not good. And this is really interesting, right? Across the board, we all agree what is a good action, what is not a good action. And that depends on our values. So values could be things like empathy, justice, integrity, loyalty, right? These could be values. We can look at honesty, for example, honesty. Knowing our values helps us in what is called ethical dilemma situations. Ethical dilemma situations are situations where we have to make a decision that has an impact on other people, the environment, or, for example, animals, right? So there can be an action that I take. For example, should I have all this lovely food here on the table? That is a decision, but it's not necessarily an ethical decision, right? It's just a decision, will I want to stay healthy or do I want to feel sick afterwards? It's not ethical. However, if I think, I'm eating all this food here whilst out there might be someone who's hungry. Okay, so that could then have an ethical impact, because then I start to take into account how my action might affect other people. Does that make sense? For example, I might make, going back to the example, stealing something. The moment someone who actually knows that stealing is not the right thing makes the decision to go and steal, they've made an ethical decision. Yeah? So what we get through this is something that is called ethical knowing. Knowing our values is called ethical knowing, and that supports our ethical decision making. So we are now firmly in the area of ethics. Ethics has a lot to do with sustainable development. Because if you think about it, when there are so many aspects and so many topics in sustainable development that have an ethical component, where the individual needs to make a decision about how they act and how they behave in relation to other people and in relation to the environment. But what is really important, because we are still at the theoretical level here, right? We are still at the, yes, okay, so we know our values and we know what we should be doing, but how do we move to action, to ethical action, which is what I've been harping on about, right, for the past half an hour. So as educators, we want to get to a point where ethical action requires moral agency. We want our students to become active citizens. We want them to be able to negotiate human interests by developing what, again, Bandura called moral agency. And all ethical action depends on moral agency. Now let's have a look what moral agency is. Bandura tells us that it is through ongoing exercise of evaluating self-influence that moral conduct is motivated and regulated, which is basically exactly what Mesiro said before, which is through ongoing critical self-reflection, right? Do we develop moral agency? And moral agency is therefore at the core of transformative STEAM education for sustainable development. It involves teaching strategies and curricula that promote the development of moral agency. In this book, Transformative STEAM Education, that I would like to introduce to you, Transformative STEAM Education for Sustainable Development, International Perspectives and Practices. That's a book that I co-edited with Professor Peter Taylor from Murdoch University. And we wrote a few chapters in there that are available, and I'm providing the links to open access chapters. However, not all chapters are available. So maybe you could get the book if you don't already have it for your library. But please do check out the open access chapters because they include the introduction to transformative STEAM education. And in the book, there are many examples, including from some of my highly appreciated Indonesian colleagues. For example, Dr. Neni Mariana from Universitas Negeri Surabaya, and from Professor Yuli Ramawati from Universitas Negeri Jakarta. So they all developed strategies and describe in their chapters in the book how they put transformative STEAM education, transformative STEAM education for sustainable development into practice. Okay, there are lots of practical activities in there that were actually trialed partly by teacher educators with their students, like that would be us, lecturers, working with our teacher education students, or also, and not or, from practicing school teachers and what they implemented in the classroom. So please check it out and you will find it, hopefully, very useful. So you will have noticed that in common parlance, a lot of people speak of STEM education, right? It's STEM, STEM, or STEM, and STEM everywhere. But you may also have noticed that we are speaking about STEAM. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit why we are doing that. So STEM education in Australia has taken on a slightly different meaning from what most educators understand by STEM. STEM education to most educators around the world means integrated curricula. Curricula where we integrate science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Okay? And the degree to which we integrate, that depends on our purpose and our context. Like, for example, if you're in a school, if you're a primary teacher, you may be able to integrate more. If you're a secondary teacher and you've got your specialized subject areas, you will find it a bit more difficult. You might have to work as a team, work together as a team. But what we have here, and I'm pretty sure you've come across that in your teacher education courses, is what integrated curricula look like. So we've got, for example, monodisciplinary, which is non-integrated. We've got multidisciplinary, where we do integrate around a theme. Then we've got interdisciplinary, where we try to really overlap a small number of learning areas, subject areas. And in transdisciplinary, we really integrate across all the learning areas that we can fit into a particular lesson. So as I said, depending on your context, depending on your purpose, different levels of integration can be used in STEM education. In Australia, the meaning of STEM has slightly changed because a lot of politicians in particular have started using STEM. They talk about the STEM disciplines. They talk about, and that basically means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but as disciplines, not integrated. Right? So when they talk about university contexts, for example, and we need to put more money into STEM subjects, we need to get more STEM graduates, they don't really mean the integrated courses, because we don't have integrated STEM courses as such, right? Whole programs, right? But they're only referring to the individual subjects, which is confusing because, you know, like, unless you're a teacher, parents, for example, they might think it's the individual subjects because that's what they hear. But as educators, we know better, don't we? So STEM education, what does STEM give us? In STEM, we definitely get the what. In other words, we get the subject contents, right? Because content is important. There is no doubt about it. We have to, even if we integrate, we have to cover science, technology, engineering, and mathematics content background. What else do we get out of STEM? We get the how, we get the skills. And those skills we get particularly through the E in STEM, which is like the design thinking and the actual building or making of things, of solutions, of products. But we think something's missing. And we think it's the arts. And why do we think the arts are missing? Come on. Up. We actually think that when we think arts, what will probably pop up in your mind immediately is the visual arts, painting, maybe a bit of sculpture, yeah? I mean, perhaps if we take it a bit further, we could go into sculpture, or we could go into drama. There is science drama, you know, where you actually try to depict certain science processes through a drama process, which works really well. However, that's not what we mean. We're actually referring to the arts more in the sense of liberal arts. And this is the liberal arts, the way it is used in, for example, American contexts. But I'm not saying we should become like Americans, but simply that the liberal arts basically include humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences combined. Okay? Now, I do know that here in Indonesia, the subjects are slightly differently split up. So, for example, you've got civics education. What else do you have? You've got character education. So you got basically what is described here as the humanities and social sciences. You got that split up. Okay? So all of these things, they would basically fall under the umbrella of humanities and social sciences. The natural sciences are pretty clear, right? That's science, and that's, you know, like engineering, technology, that falls under the science, natural sciences. But with the humanities, what we also put in there are things like philosophy, religion, and ethics. Okay, they fall under humanities and social sciences. So when you then look at STEM through the lens of including the humanities and the social sciences, so basically the arts as in the liberal arts, the A, gives you the why. So we've had the what, we've had the how, and now we've got the why, because now we can suddenly address values. We can suddenly have philosophical discussions about why we do something, what we should be doing, right? Whereas if we only operate in the natural sciences, which is what STEM would be, yeah, pure STEM, then that's not normally done, right? Because that's focusing so much on content and just transmitting the skills. So if we really want to change people's attitudes, we need the A in there. So then, through that lens, STEAM education needs integrated science curricula that provide links to students' real lives. And this is really important, the link to students' real lives. Basically, focusing on a topic that is locally relevant. So, for example, if you teach in a village, find a topic, if you can, that is relevant to this village, to the local region, to your local city, to your province, to your country, and then maybe spread out to the rest of the world. It will also depend on the age of the students. What research has shown is that the younger the students, the more local the content should be, that they can relate to, right? So my dear colleagues, Neni Mariana and Yuli Ramawati, they actually have done fantastic work in the area of ethnomathematics and ethnoscience. And basically, I really refer you to their work. They've also published in Indonesian journals with their colleagues, with their students. And there is plenty of materials, you know, you can look up when you look up those lovely ladies that are looking at local contexts and that give you a really good idea what it could look like. Yeah. So, yes, we still teach scientific contents. Absolutely. We do. Like Yuli Ramawati, for example, did a fantastic project last year where they looked at foods that are specific to certain regions in Java and the chemical processes involved in producing that food. For example, fermentation. Yeah. And they were basically teaching the chemistry of fermentation through learning about the local food that everyone eats. And the students got really into it because they all know the food. They all love it. And therefore it had a direct connection to their meaning. It made meaning. So learning like that is meaningful. And I know that you currently try to put deep learning into your curricula. So meaningful is one of the big aspects of education. So if you make these links to real lives of your students, learning becomes more meaningful. So the focus of STEAM education with the A in it is a focus on the formation of the whole human being, right? Because it includes values, it includes character building. So you got character education, right? As a whole, as a separate subject area. But in a way, this fits really well with what we're trying to do. STEAM education uses holistic pedagogical strategies such as ethical dilemma story pedagogy. I've spoken about ethical dilemma stories before. So basically the pedagogy that I used in my thesis, in my doctoral thesis, it's a pedagogy that has been now, I taught Yuli and I taught Neni, and they are now using it with their students. And basically, you know, it's traveling around the world. It's a pedagogy where you pack a particular ethical dilemma, a particular sustainability issue, for example, into a story. And in that story, you know, storytelling works really well with students because this is how they've learned from early childhood onwards. And basically, in that story, a character in the story makes an ethical decision, okay? And you ask the students to make the decision on behalf of the character. What would you do in that situation? And then you have discussions. You get the students to discuss what is the right solution. The teacher doesn't tell them the right solution. They have to come up with a solution. And also very important in ethical dilemma story pedagogy, there may be more than one solution. You do not try to come to one solution. And we will come back to that, why this is important in a little while. So there can be more solutions than one. They may not be happy if there are several solutions because they always think that their solution is the best, of course. But as a teacher, it's really important to hold back your own opinion because students, as we all know, when they find out what you think, they will say what they think you want them to hear, you know, you want them to say. So let's hold that back because we really want them to work on their values and to make the decisions. So that's really important. There is a chapter in the book, by the way, on ethical dilemma story pedagogy, how it works, how the stories are structured. So please feel free to look that up. So that takes me back to the book where these are the links to the chapters that are currently available. Open access. So I will make the presentation available to my dear colleague Diane, and she can share with you the particular links and you can access that, no problem. Chapter 4 is a chapter I wrote where I worked with my own students, my pre-service teachers, through a sequence of lessons that could be taught over a period of about 8 weeks, right? So just to give you an idea of what it could look like. The theme that we were looking at were sustainable oceans. And basically the sequence of lessons is described in the chapter 4 of the book. So we started off with an activity. This is primary teachers, right? So we started off with an activity that is often taught in year 2 in Australia, which is called What Sinks, What Floats. So you basically give students different materials, different objects, and you get them to test what floats, what sinks. Basically, they're learning about buoyancy. From that, once you know what sinks, what floats, you give students different materials. Some of them will sink, some of them will float. And you say to them, build a raft. And the raft has to withstand severe weather, has to not sink to the ground of the ocean. So we have to make sure it keeps floating. So the students, my students, built rafts, okay? And they tried it out and they tested it in a big wash basin. And we tested the storms with a hairdryer, and we tested fall with a watering can. So would our raft withstand the severe storms? And what we did after we had built the raft, we then went to the curriculum and we started mapping the curriculum. Basically, we looked at what links can we find in the curriculum, not just science, technology, engineering, the arts and mathematics, but maybe even outside, right? That we could link to the topic of building a raft. And my students actually came up with a really nice map where they could show that they could use pretty much links from all the learning areas. Okay, this is really interesting. Basically taking us into the transdisciplinary curriculum integration area. Now, obviously, curriculum mapping is not an activity you would do with school students, but we did because we were teacher educators, right? Then we challenged them a bit further because, as we all know, the economy plays an important role in Australia. So there is, of course, oil and gas exploration. And the principle of oil platforms is a raft. Okay, so you need to understand how a raft works before you can build a floating oil or gas platform. But the challenge will be different in this case, because in this case, we don't want the raft to float away, obviously, but we want that raft, the platform, to be firmly attached to the ground so that it does not move. But it still needs to float and be able to move a little bit with the movement of the ocean. So new challenges, right? So they were using the raft they had built before and they were turning it into an oil platform. So now where do we bring the ethics in? Well, as we all know, oil platforms, there can be accidents and there can be oil spills. And there is actually, I don't normally refer to Hollywood movies, but there is a good one. And that is called Deepwater Horizon. So some of you may have seen that already. It's enough to just watch the trailer to get the idea if you don't want to watch the whole movie. But it is based on a real story where there was a big oil platform by, I think it was BP, they owned it, in the Gulf of Mexico that has recently been renamed, but I'll still call it Gulf of Mexico. And there was an accident on that oil platform and it exploded. And there were many people on the oil platform that actually died. And as a consequence of the explosion, there was a huge oil spill that affected the coast of the southern USA and into Mexico. And even 10 years after the accident, there's still, like they can see the effects of the oil spill from back then. There are, when you go online and you look up, just look at photos from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, you will see the effect on birds, water birds, and it's just really, really challenging to see. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. I'll be finished soon. And so this, what was the ethical dilemma there? Well, the ethical dilemma was that an investigation found that BP, can you imagine? BP, a company that for whom $50,000 is nothing, did not put an additional security valve into the oil platform because they wanted to save $50,000. And because that security valve had not been put in, the explosion happened. Okay, so there's the ethical dilemma for you. Was it okay to save $50,000 and risk the oil spill and the huge environmental impact? So that then led to an ethical dilemma discussion, right? And because, a discussion should always lead to action, my students were then tasked with building an oil spill barrier. Okay, this is again, you provide materials and you say to them, the barrier, find out which of your barriers is the most effective barrier. So yes, they all came up with different barriers. Some were more effective than others. What else could we cover when we talk about a topic like this? We could bring in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and histories, which is in Australia, how Aboriginal people would relate to the ocean and to their country, which is very different, right? Because country is the most valuable thing they have. We could also look at ocean acidification and coral bleaching, right? We all know what corals look like and coral bleaching. So that could be another topic we could bring in there. So you can see this can run over the course of about 8 weeks, and you can flesh that out in much more detail. But it works. So this is what that chapter is about. So basically, to keep that example in mind, in STEAM education, we also educate for thinking. And this is a really important point, because in traditional teaching, like in traditional mathematics teaching, you teach your students convergent thinking, which is thinking that results in one solution, right? Mathematics teachers are normally not keen on having several different solutions to a topic, right? Or a particular equation. There needs to be one solution, right? And that's the right one, normally. That's at least how I was taught mathematics. I don't know if it's changed. But as you could see with STEAM, where we bring in opportunities for developing different solutions, coming up with solutions to complex problems, we end up with divergent thinking. Okay, so that starts with a problem and creates many possible solutions, like we have different oil spill barriers that came up, some more efficient than others. And I believe that 21st century design thinking requires both. We need divergent and convergent thinking. So to bring my talk to a close, I promised you we'll do some visioning for education for sustainable development in the 21st century, which is where you as teachers come in. Encourage your students to create creative solutions to the challenges of the Anthropocene. For that, we require divergent and convergent thinking for complex problems. And we need teachers, and that's all of you, including the lecturers and myself, who can teach both and promote moral agency at the same time. And only like this, I'm convinced, can we actually change people's attitudes towards sustainable development and get them to act in different ways. Thank you. Terry McCassie.
Thank you so much, Professor Taylor. It's really awesome. I mean, I think I have like 4 pages notes and I learned a lot about Anthropocene and also like all the philosophy and why do we need to add the A into the STEM, which is really awesome. So I think we can invite our pre-service teachers, our future teachers, to probably have burning questions for Professor Tyler. This is your time. Anyone from the audience, the students? We got one. Awesome.
Brave.
Should we provide her a microphone? Oh, yeah.
Another one.
Do we have another one? Oh, yeah. The first one, the second one. Okay, we have 3. Probably we're going to have 3 first, and we'll see how it goes because we need to end it around like 10:15. Awesome. So sorry.
That's okay. I'm glad they have questions. That's good.
It's really, I mean, this is really new knowledge.
Is it? Is it?
I'm not from social. I'm not from.
Yeah. But it is a mix, isn't it? Yes, that's the purpose. You have to listen very carefully because my hearing is sometimes not that great. So please try and hear from me.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I am Syabana Nurina Aziz, a doctoral student from mathematics education. Okay, I have one question. Many people agree that adding the arts makes STEM more humanized. But in reality, especially in Indonesia, mathematics is always been seen as the most important subject, while the arts often don't get much attention in Indonesia. But since we're talking about sustainability, where human values matter just as much as technical skill, how do you see the real role of arts with STEM, especially balancing the art with mathematics, so that mathematics is not just about numbers, but also helps students build empathy, build moral awareness, and the courage to take a real action for sustainability? Thank you.
Okay, the role of mathematics. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that mathematics and, like the hard sciences, like physics and so on, in Australia as well, seem to be very highly valued above everything else. But as, I hope I could show in the talk was that, we need to bring in the arts to, give us an opportunity in the curriculum to justify why we are talking about values. Yeah. And I think, if you actually do STEAM education, right? In STEAM education, as I was saying, you integrate. And the main focus is actually you start with science and then integrate technology, then engineering, and then the arts and maths. So mathematics in STEAM is one of 5 learning areas integrated together. It is important, right? No doubt about it. But because in an integrated curriculum, you basically try to give almost equal importance to each learning area. I hope this makes sense. Now, in secondary schools, for example, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because you are a specialist in your area, and you may have, if you want to do STEAM, you can still do it because you just have to work with your colleagues, like who are science, technology, engineering, and maths. You're the math specialist, but, like specialists in those areas, and then, work with them together and make a project. I hope that answers your question. Does it?
Yes, yes, thank you very much.
By the way, I have actually, talking about mathematics and the arts, I had a pre-service teacher who on his practicum taught quadratic equations by teaching boys in an all-boys school a dance. And every step of the quadratic equation was a dance step. And the way he got them to do it, he basically said, and I was just amazed because I watched him on his prac. He basically said to them, oh, like if I was in a girls' school now, I would teach quadratic equations through a dance. But because you're boys, you don't want to do this, do you? And the boys immediately went, what do you mean we don't dance? And, and so he said, no, like I can teach you a dance, right? And you will learn quadratic equations. And they said, yeah, come on, try us. So he did. He taught them every step of the quadratic equation through dance. And when they did the tests, I kid you not, because I was there when they did their test, you could see some of the students go like during the test. So they had embodied the equation, right? Which was, I think, a fantastic way of combining, health and physical education and art through dance and mathematics. So, you can be very creative. And they all learned quadratic equations, by the way, really well, because they won't forget them now, right?
Wow, what an awesome example, like integrating arts into maths.
Yes,
It's all about create.
absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. I hope that answers
Yes,
the
that's
question.
very
Yeah.
answer my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, by the way, Dr. Neni Mariana, I think it is in the book actually. She has a chapter where they look at a dance, a Javanese dance, and linking it to mathematics.
We should really check that out.
You should check it out. Yes.
I'll check it. All right.
Yeah.
Can we have the second question? Okay. All right. Second question.
Hello, I'm
Hey.
Hesti Aulia, came from student of elementary school, Magister. Okay, thank you for the opportunities. How can STEAM integration enhance?
It's okay. If you feel more comfortable, you can speak in Bahasa.
Yeah, I will help.
Yes, don't worry.
Translate it.
How can STEAM integration about awareness and understanding of environmental issue? Thank you.
Okay.
Wow. How can we integrate as team to build awareness on environmental issues?
Mm.
And she's from
Right. I think, particularly as elementary teachers or primary teachers, because you are generalist teachers, yeah, you got a particular chance to actually do this in your own classroom. Because, as I was showing, when we did the curriculum mapping, my students could show that they had actually covered. They had covered aspects of English, they had aspects covered of mathematics, and so they could go through the curriculum and tick it off. So as a primary teacher, if you're actually required to teach everything anyway, when you put together a project like, what we had here, you then do your curriculum mapping, and this is very central. You can't do curriculum integration without curriculum mapping. So that is really important. Know the curriculum and know how you can find the links in the curriculum, because that will allow you to then say, yes, I have taught this. I have taught that particular aspect of the curriculum. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we don't have to teach all these aspects separately in their separate learning areas, but we can teach them together as long as we tick them off. I hope that answers your question.
And I think you also mentioned the examples about the buoyancy test done by your students.
Yes.
I think that's also a really good example that we can bring to the school, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So in Australia, I don't know what it's like here, but in particularly primary education, teacher education, we try to teach our students as much hands-on activities as possible so that they can take those activities out into schools and teach them. So they experience the activities first, and then they can go and teach them. That's the idea.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Now, okay, the third question.
Thank you. Good morning, Prof. Taylor. I'm Sayidati Marlinda Yunita. I am come from Magister of Elementary Education. Bapak Singgi, my teacher. Kayak berdiri. Kayak gitu. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm also a teacher in Bromo Tengger Semeru Lumajang village, Argosari village. I'm fifth grade. I'm teacher in fifth grade. Nah, dicampur-campur, enggak apa-apa ya, Mbak?
It's okay, it's okay. She's mixing with Indonesian.
Okay. Jadi in Bromo Tengger Semeru have many flower
we call Edelweiss flower, Anaphalis javanica, that many flower ada di lembaga kami di sekolah itu banyak sekali many flower gitu ya, campur sudah enggak apa-apa kan ya, kan es campur itu lebih enak ya Bapak Ibu ya. Iya, I try to children in my class with using PBL, problem based learning.
Yes.
For apa ya? Untuk mengenalkan ekosistem, materi ekosistem in IPAS Maple. Nah, has the result good, but my students apa ya, little empatinya kurang gitu, little empathy gitu. Pokoknya gitu dah Mbak ya. Jadi gitu, empatinya kurang. Kalau untuk di content knowledge-nya, it's okay, gitu. Nah, so I interest to try STEAM project to my students dengan harapan nih tujuannya nanti resultnya good, kemudian attitude sama empatinya pun juga mengikuti good juga. Maybe Prof. Taylor can make me the apa ya, sesuatu ya, something yang apa, solution ya, good solution yang bisa nantinya empati sama attitude-nya siswa itu bagus, tidak hanya knowledge, sehingga balance gitu. Mohon diterjemahkan Mbak, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Wow. Okay.
That was a really comprehensive question.
Yes.
So
yes.
in her school, they have like Edelweiss,
Yes.
a really beautiful flower in Bromo.
That is our national flower.
Yes.
We just saying.
Beautiful flowers.
Yes, it is.
So she tried using problem-based learning
Yes.
to introduce
Yes.
the concept
Yeah.
to the students, but content-based, the student did
Yeah.
great, but they still lack of empathy. So how would you suggest her
Right.
to
So how
boost
did the lack of empathy show?
Bagaimana Mbak Sahidah melihat empatinya tuh kurangnya di bagian apa?
Nggak apa-apa ya bahasa Indonesia Mbak. Jadi gini, kami punya yang namanya komunitas petani budidaya Edelweiss. Namun dalam tanda kutip, mereka ini sudah punya taman yang memang dikhususkan untuk di Edelweiss ditanam, kemudian dipetik gitu ya. Ya ini, namun memang masih ada beberapa oknum yang mengambil Edelweiss dari hutan, dan ini padahal adalah tanaman yang dilindungi, gitu. Jadi empatinya sangat kurang karena siswa itu melihat orang tuanya sendiri memetik Edelweiss di hutan, dan walaupun mereka juga juga melihat sendiri orang tua menanam Edelweiss di taman, namun jumlah yang tumbuh dengan yang diambil tidak sebanding. Lebih banyak yang diambil daripada yang ditanam. Karena kalau menanam kan memang enak ya. Apapun itu lebih enak mengambil, sama kayak tambang. Itu udah lebih enak mengambil daripada menunggu untuk tumbuh itu. Dan itulah yang sebuah kekhawatiran bagi kami terhadap anak-anak kami yang saat ini berada di Argosari. Gitu. Terima kasih.
Got it. So basically, the students didn't really have the kind of awareness to maintain the flower, even though there are like farmer community that produce and grow the flower.
Yes.
And for context, the flower is actually protected by the law. We cannot, irresponsibly pick the flowers because it's really hard to grow the flowers. So yeah, that lack of awareness is
Yes.
still there.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, the students are year 5 students, right? Yes. I think what I found with my students was that what did help when I tried to show them how much plants and animals and humans actually have in common. Okay? That I mean, it depends on the age, obviously, but when you actually look through a microscope and you look at plant cells and you look at animal cells, then you can really see that, they basically look the same, except for that plant cells have a cell wall rather than just a membrane, and they got some green chloroplasts in there. But other than that, at the cellular level, we're all the same. We all need to eat something. Okay, plants make their own food. We have to eat something else, right? But basically just show up the comparisons that they are actually living beings. And I think this is the important thing. A lot of people do not realize that plants are living things. This doesn't really sink in. Because, like there is a dilemma story that I was working with some years back about cutting down a tree where, some of the students thought, well, it's just a tree. Who cares? Right? But then when we actually looked at it more closely, I was saying to them, like, for example, what happens if your cat gets sick at home? You've got a pet cat at home and she gets sick and you love her very much. Now, I don't know whether that would happen in Indonesia, but in Australia or in Austria, people would take the cat to the vet and let her, being treated. And then I said to them, okay, so you get your cat looked after. What would you do if, like your indoor plant gets sick, right? And the leaves start dropping and it starts to get yellow leaves. Well, they said, well, I'll throw it in the bin. And I said to them, well, what if your indoor plant had a voice and could actually make a sound? Like, for example, call out to you when you throw it in the bin. Would that change how you treat your indoor plant? And they said yes. So basically, because plants can't scream, that's why we treat them like objects. Have you ever thought about that? It's true, isn't it? If every plant could scream, it would be really stressful.
Yeah.
Just getting vegetables from the vegetable garden. So, but I mean, if you want to, for example, get some empathy for plants, that's a really good way of getting it to them. What if Edelweiss flowers could scream?
Okay.
Would you throw them in the bin? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe yes. Maybe some students go, yeah, so I don't care.
So building their empathy and
Yes.
giving them the visualization. Yeah.
Yes.
Because the plants also are the living beings. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. All right. I'm so sorry. I think we still have like several questions, but because of the time limitation, I think we should end the session here. And it's really amazing to listen to the lecture. I told you I have 4 pages notes, 4 pages, and I do hope our pre-service teachers learn a lot from today's session. And with all that being said, I think we should say thank you so much, and thank you, Professor Taylor. Give a round of applause.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy your stay in Jember. And I will conclude with wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yeah. Thank you all for having me. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you. And I hope you can take something useful and meaningful away. Thank you.
Yes. Education is we discuss with teacher and student at the school. Yeah, at school. Yes. It's a traditional tradition.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude today's program, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to Associate Professor Elizabeth Taylor, PhD, as our distinguished guests, lecturers, and students for your kind presence and active participation.
May this event provide meaningful insights and further strengthen academic collaboration between our institutions.
Once again, we extend our sincere gratitude. Good morning, and we look forward to welcoming you again at our forthcoming academic events. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Universitas Jember, salah satu perguruan tinggi terbaik di Indonesia yang hadir untuk mencetak generasi unggul dan inovatif. Dengan berbagai kampus yang tersebar di Tapal Kuda, Jawa Timur. Di antaranya Universitas Jember Kampus Bondowoso yang terletak di Kabupaten Bondowoso, Universitas Jember Kampus Lumajang di Kabupaten Lumajang, Universitas Jember Kampus Kota Pasuruan di Kota Pasuruan, dan Universitas Jember Kampus Vokasi yang terletak di Jember, Jawa Timur. Kampus utama Universitas Jember berada di Tegal Boto. Sebagai pusat akademik, kampus ini memiliki berbagai fakultas, fasilitas lengkap, serta pusat penelitian yang mendukung mahasiswa dalam mengembangkan potensinya. Universitas Jember Kampus Bondowoso. UNEJ Kampus Bondowoso hadir untuk menjawab kebutuhan masyarakat akan pendidikan berkualitas. Terletak di daerah yang kaya akan sektor pertanian. Kampus ini menawarkan program studi unggulan yang berbeda dengan kampus Tegal Boto. Berkontribusi dalam berbagai sektor, termasuk pertanian.
Layarnya Pak, layar pertama. Saya.
Recording stopped.
Universitas Jember, salah satu perguruan tinggi terbaik di Indonesia yang hadir untuk mencetak generasi unggul dan inovatif. Dengan berbagai kampus yang